If you wear that dress, I'll marry you. The Arab millionaire's laughter echoed through the crystal ballroom as he pointed at the elegant gown, mocking the housekeeper in front of his elite guests. Everyone joined his cruel joke. But months later, when she walked down that same hallway wearing that exact dress, his laughter died in his throat forever. The crystal chandeliers of the Al Rahman mansion cast dancing shadows across marble floors so pristine they reflected like mirrors. Layla Hassan moved through the grand ballroom with practiced invisibility, her cleaning cartwheels barely making a sound on the polished surface. She had perfected the art of being present, yet unseen, a skill every housekeeper learned when working for families whose wealth exceeded the GDP of small nations. At 42 years old, Layla had been cleaning homes of the ultra-wealthy for over 20 years. Her hands, roughened by decades of chemical cleaners and hard work, told stories she never spoke aloud. Each morning, she woke before dawn in her modest apartment across the city, took 2 buses to reach this neighborhood of gated estates and armed security, and entered through the service entrance that people like her were expected to use. The Al Rahman estate was her latest assignment through the Prestige Domestic Services Agency, and it was unlike anything she had encountered before. Khalid Al Rahman, at 38 years old, had built a technology and real estate empire that spanned 3 continents. His mansion was a monument to excess: 12 bedrooms, 15 bathrooms, an indoor pool, a private cinema, and a ballroom that could host 200 guests comfortably. But what struck Layla most wasn't the wealth itself. She had cleaned enough mansions to become numb to luxury. What disturbed her was the atmosphere of casual cruelty that permeated every interaction between Khalid and those he considered beneath him. "Layla!" The sharp voice of Victoria Sterling, the estate manager, cut through her thoughts. Victoria was a woman who had climbed from middle management to her current position through a combination of efficiency and an almost sadistic attention to detail. "Mr. Al Rahman wants the ballroom perfect for tonight's engagement party. Not good, perfect. Do you understand the difference?" "Yes, ma'am," Layla responded quietly, keeping her eyes lowered as she had learned to do. "I doubt that," Victoria sneered, walking closer to inspect Layla's work with the intensity of a military general. "People like you think clean enough is acceptable. But Mr. Al Rahman's guests tonight include ministers, ambassadors, and business moguls who could buy your entire neighborhood with pocket change. One fingerprint on a champagne glass, one speck of dust on a table, and you'll be back on the streets looking for work." Layla wanted to point out that she had never left a fingerprint or speck of dust in 20 years of professional work. She wanted to say that her attention to detail had earned her the highest ratings at every previous assignment. But she had learned long ago that defending yourself to people who had already decided you were inferior only made things worse. "I understand, ma'am. Everything will be perfect." Victoria circled her like a predator, clearly hoping to find something to criticize. "The dress has arrived," she said suddenly, her voice taking on a different quality. "Mr. Al Rahman's fiancée's engagement dress. It cost more than you'll earn in your entire lifetime. It's in the display room. You'll clean that room last, and you'll be extremely careful not to breathe on the dress, touch the dress, or even look at the dress for too long. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, ma'am." As Victoria's heels clicked away across the marble, Layla felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It wasn't anger exactly, though anger was certainly part of it. It was a bone-deep weariness, with being treated as something less than human. She had endured decades of condescension, of being spoken to as if her economic circumstances indicated intellectual or moral deficiency. But lately, something inside her had begun to shift. She couldn't quite name it yet, but it felt like the moment before a storm when the air pressure changes and you know something significant is coming. The afternoon passed in a blur of polishing, arranging, and perfecting every detail of the ballroom. Layla worked with the focused intensity that had made her excellent at her job, even if that excellence was never acknowledged. Other staff members came and went, caterers setting up elaborate food stations, florists arranging exotic blooms that had been flown in from 3 different countries, sound technicians testing equipment for the evening's entertainment. She overheard snippets of conversation that painted a picture of the evening's main event. Khalid al-Rahman was announcing his engagement to Miranda Blackwood, daughter of a British banking dynasty. It was, according to the whispers, more of a merger than a marriage, combining Middle Eastern oil wealth with European financial power in a union that would be covered by society pages worldwide. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Layla made her way to the display room where the engagement dress waited. Victoria's warning echoed in her mind, but she was professional. She would clean the room without incident, as she always did. But when she opened the door and saw the dress, something inside her chest constricted painfully. It was breathtaking. A creation of flowing silk and intricate beadwork. It hung on a mannequin in the center of the room like a piece of art. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Thousands of tiny crystals catching the light, creating the illusion that the dress itself was alive and breathing. Layla had seen expensive things before, but this transcended mere expense. This was artistry. For just a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to wear something so beautiful. Not because she wanted luxury for luxury's sake, but because the dress represented something she had never experienced. Being valued, being celebrated, being seen as worthy of something exquisite. The moment shattered when she heard footsteps approaching. Multiple footsteps, accompanied by loud laughter and the clink of glasses. She immediately stepped back from the dress, positioned herself against the wall in the posture of invisibility she had perfected, and waited. Khalid al-Rahman entered first, surrounded by a group of similarly wealthy men who reeked of cologne and entitlement. He was handsome in the way that unlimited resources could make anyone handsome. Perfectly groomed, expensively dressed, radiating the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. "Gentlemen, this is the dress," Khalid announced with the pride of someone showing off a prized possession. "Designed by Jacques Fontaine himself. Only 3 like it exist in the world. Cost me $500,000. The men circled the dress, making appreciative noises. Layla remained motionless against the wall, hoping they would take what they came to see and leave. But then Khalid's eyes landed on her, and something cruel flickered across his face. "You there," he said, pointing at Layla, as if she were a piece of furniture he had just noticed. "What are you doing in here?" "Cleaning, sir, Miss. Sterling instructed me to prepare this room for the evening." Did she now? Khalid walked closer, and Layla could smell the expensive whiskey on his breath. His friends followed, sensing entertainment in the making. "And what do you think of the dress?" The question was a trap. Layla knew it instinctively. Answer that it was beautiful, and she would be mocked for having opinions above her station. Answer that she didn't notice it, and she would be called blind or stupid. There was no safe response. "It's very elegant, sir," she said carefully, trying to find neutral ground. "Very elegant," Khalid repeated mockingly, and his friends laughed on cue like trained seals. "Did you hear that, gentlemen? She thinks it's very elegant," as if her opinion on haute couture matters even slightly. Layla felt heat rising to her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. She had survived worse humiliations. She could survive this. But Khalid wasn't finished. He was the kind of man who needed an audience for his cruelty, who fed on the laughter and approval of his peers as they watched him diminish someone powerless to fight back. "Tell me," he said, his voice dripping with false curiosity. "Have you ever worn anything elegant? Anything that didn't come from a discount store or a donation bin?" His friends chuckled. One of them, a portly man with a thick gold chain, added, "Khalid, stop torturing the poor woman. She probably thinks elegant means clean." The laughter grew louder. Layla's hands, hidden behind her back, clenched into fists. She wanted to tell them that she knew more about true elegance than any of them ever would. That elegance wasn't about expensive fabric, but about how you treated other human beings. That there was nothing elegant about humiliating someone for your friend's entertainment. But she said nothing, because she needed this job. Because she had bills to pay, and a daughter whose university tuition depended on her swallowing her pride and accepting whatever degradation came her way. Then Khalid had what he clearly thought was a hilarious idea. "I'll tell you what," he said, his voice rising with the excitement of his own perceived cleverness. "Why don't you try on the dress, just for a moment? I want to see what $500,000 looks like on someone who probably earns that much in, what, 20 lifetimes?" The room fell silent, except for a few gasps and nervous giggles. Even his friends seemed unsure if Khalid had gone too far. But Khalid was warming to his theme, energized by the shocked reactions. "No, seriously," he continued, walking to the dress and gesturing at it dramatically. "Come on. Try it on. If you can wear it without looking absolutely ridiculous, if you can somehow make that dress look like it belongs on you." He paused for effect. "Then I'll marry you instead of Miranda." The room exploded in laughter. His friends howled as if it was the funniest joke they had ever heard. The portly man with the gold chain slapped his knee repeatedly. Another friend, tall and thin with a perpetual sneer, actually had tears running down his face from laughing so hard. "Oh my God, Khalid," the tall friend gasped between laughs. "Marry the housekeeper. Can you imagine? Your mother would have a heart attack. The wedding photos would be priceless," another added. "Put her next to Miranda and see which one actually belongs in our world." Khalid basked in the reaction, clearly feeling like a comedy genius. He looked at Layla expectantly, waiting for her to either try on the dress and provide more entertainment, or flee in embarrassment, which would also be entertaining. But Layla didn't flee, and she didn't try on the dress. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. She looked Khalid directly in the eyes for the first time since he had entered the room, not with defiance exactly, but with a quiet dignity that somehow made his laughter seem hollow and pathetic. "No thank you, sir," she said clearly. "I don't try on things that don't belong to me." The laughter died instantly. Khalid's expression flickered between confusion and anger at having his joke interrupted. His friends looked at each other uncertainly, unsure how to react to a housekeeper who had just refused to play along with their entertainment. "Excuse me," Khalid said, his voice dangerous now. "The dress belongs to your fiancé," Layla continued with the same quiet firmness. "It wouldn't be appropriate for me to try it on. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish before the party begins." She moved toward the door, but Khalid stepped into her path. The cruel playfulness had vanished from his face, replaced by genuine anger at being challenged by someone he considered insignificant. "You think you're clever," he said softly, but his voice carried a threat. "You think refusing makes you somehow better than the joke I was making. But let me tell you something, Cleaner. You could wear that dress, you could wear 100 dresses like it, and you would still be exactly what you are. You would still be invisible. You would still be someone whose only value is in how well you scrub my floors." The words were designed to hurt, to put her back in the place he thought she belonged. And they did hurt, but they also did something else. They crystallized something that had been forming in Layla's mind for months, maybe years. She was tired, bone deep, soul level tired. Tired of being invisible, tired of swallowing her dignity, tired of watching people who had never worked a day in their lives mock those who worked every day just to survive. "Is that what you really think?" she asked quietly. "That the only thing that gives a person value is wealth? That someone who cleans is automatically less than someone who inherited money?" Khalid laughed, but it sounded forced now. "I didn't inherit all my money. I built an empire. With your father's initial investment, with connections you were born into, with opportunities that people like me will never have," Layla responded. She wasn't sure where this courage was coming from, but once she started, she couldn't stop. "You think you're self-made, but you started the race halfway to the finish line, while the rest of us were still trying to find the track." His friends had gone completely silent, watching this unexpected confrontation unfold. The portly man with the gold chain was no longer laughing. The tall, sneering friend looked uncomfortable. "Get out," Khalid said, his voice shaking with rage. "Get out before I have security throw you out. And don't bother coming back. You're fired." Layla felt her heart sink. She had known this would be the consequence, but hearing it still hurt. Still, she held her head high as she walked to the door. But before she left, she turned back one final time. "One day," she said quietly, "you're going to realize that the people you mock and dismiss are the ones who see you most clearly. Because while you're too busy looking down on us, we're seeing exactly who you really are." She left the room without waiting for a response, walking through the mansion's service corridors with tears she refused to let fall until she was outside. She had just lost a job she desperately needed. She had probably destroyed her reputation with the agency, which meant finding new work would be nearly impossible. But as she walked through the service exit for the last time, breathing in the cool evening air, she felt something unexpected. She felt free. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. Layla stared out the window as the gleaming estates of the wealthy district gave way to modest neighborhoods where people like her actually lived. Her phone buzzed insistently in her pocket, but she already knew what the messages would say. Victoria Sterling had wasted no time reporting her insubordination to the prestige domestic services agency. When she finally checked her phone at a red light, her suspicions were confirmed. 3 messages from her agency supervisor, each more threatening than the last. The final one was simple and devastating. Contract terminated effective immediately. Do not contact us for future assignments. Layla closed her eyes and let the reality sink in. 20 years of spotless professional reputation, destroyed in a single evening, because she had refused to be entertainment for cruel men. She thought of her daughter Amira, studying architecture at the State University. Thought of the tuition payment due in 2 weeks. Thought of rent, utilities, food. She thought of that dress. That beautiful, impossible dress. When she arrived at her small apartment, Amira was studying at the kitchen table, surrounded by blueprints and textbooks. At 19, she had inherited her mother's determination and added her own fierce intelligence. She looked up when Layla entered, and her smile immediately faded. "Mama, what happened?" Layla tried to smile, tried to pretend everything was fine as she had done so many times before. But something broke inside her, and the story came pouring out. The dress, the mockery, Khalid's cruel joke, her refusal to play along, the consequences. Amira listened with growing fury, her hands clenched into fists on the table. "He said he'd marry you if you wore the dress? Like you were some kind of joke? Like you weren't even a real person?" "It doesn't matter now," Layla said tiredly. "What matters is I need to find work quickly." "No," Amira said fiercely. "What matters is that people like him think they can treat people like you as if you're disposable, as if your dignity means nothing." "My dignity doesn't pay bills, Habibti." "Maybe it should," Amira muttered, returning to her blueprints with unusual intensity. The next morning, Layla began the humbling process of job hunting. She contacted smaller agencies, applied directly to households, reached out to every connection she had built over 2 decades. But news traveled fast in the domestic services community. The story of the housekeeper who had disrespected Khalid al-Rahman had spread like wildfire. Doors that would have opened easily before remained firmly closed. Days passed, then a week. Layla's savings dwindled. She sold jewelry, furniture, anything of value. She applied for retail positions, restaurant work, anything that would bring in money. But she was overqualified for entry-level positions and underqualified for everything else. On the 8th day after her firing, something unexpected happened. Layla was walking through the downtown business district, returning from yet another rejected job application, when she passed the window of an exclusive bridal boutique called Maison Elegance. She normally wouldn't have even glanced at such a place, but something made her stop. In the window was a dress, not the same dress from Khalid's mansion, but similar in its breathtaking beauty. And standing inside the boutique, gesturing animatedly at the dress, was a woman Layla recognized from photographs, Miranda Blackwood, Khalid's fiancée. Layla was about to walk away when she noticed something odd. Miranda looked distressed, almost in tears, while 3 boutique attendants hovered helplessly around her. Through the glass, Layla could see the problem. The dress Miranda had selected was clearly too large, hanging awkwardly on her petite frame. The attendants were trying to explain something, probably that alterations would take time she apparently didn't have. Layla's hand was on the door before she consciously decided to enter. An old instinct from her mother, who had been a seamstress, pulled her forward. "Excuse me," she said to one of the attendants, who looked at her clothing and immediately assumed she was lost. "I can help." "Ma'am, this is a private appointment," the attendant said coolly. "If you need assistance, you'll have to make an appointment." But Miranda had heard Layla's voice and turned. Up close, she was younger than Layla had expected, perhaps 25, with the kind of beauty that came from good genetics and better skincare. But her eyes were red from crying, and she looked desperate. "Can you really help?" Miranda asked, her British accent crisp but strained. "The wedding is in 2 days, and this dress is the only one in the city that matches my vision." But it's completely wrong for my size. Layla approached the dress, her experienced eyes assessing the situation immediately. I can alter it. Not perfectly, not like a professional couturier would, but well enough that no one will notice. I'll need access to a sewing room in 6 hours. The head attendant scoffed. And who are you exactly? We can't just let anyone— Let her try, Miranda interrupted. What do I have to lose at this point? What followed was 6 hours of the most intense work Layla had done in years. The boutique's sewing room became her domain as she measured, cut, pinned, and stitched with the precision her mother had taught her decades ago. Miranda stayed, watching in fascination as Layla transformed the ill-fitting gown into something that looked custom-made. They talked while Layla worked. Miranda revealed things she probably wouldn't have shared under normal circumstances. About the pressure from both families to make this marriage work. About Khalid's drinking and his cruel sense of humor. About feeling trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow within. He mocks people, Miranda said quietly. His staff, waiters, drivers, anyone he sees is beneath him. I've tried to say something, but he just laughs and tells me I'm too sensitive. Layla's hands paused briefly on the fabric. He mocked me, she said, a week ago. I was cleaning his mansion, and he made a joke about me trying on your engagement dress. Said he'd marry me instead if I could wear it without looking ridiculous. Miranda's face went pale. That's disgusting. I'm so sorry. It wasn't your fault. But I refused to play along, and he fired me. I've been unemployed since. Silence fell between them, heavy with shared understanding. Finally, Miranda spoke. What if I hired you? Not as a housekeeper, but as my personal attendant. I need someone around me who isn't afraid to tell the truth, who isn't performing for Khalid's approval. Layla looked up from her sewing. Your fiancé would never allow it. He doesn't control everything, Miranda said with sudden steel in her voice. Not yet, anyway. When Layla finished the alterations, Miranda stood before the mirror in the transformed dress, and tears filled her eyes again. But these were different tears. It's perfect, she whispered. You're an artist. I'm a housekeeper who learned to sew from her mother, Layla corrected gently. No, Miranda said firmly, meeting her eyes in the mirror. You're whatever you choose to be, and I choose to believe you're meant for more than cleaning other people's homes. As Layla left the boutique that evening with a check that would cover 3 months of expenses and a job offer that would change everything, she thought about Khalid's words, about being invisible, about value being determined by economic status. And she thought about the dress she had altered, about transformation being possible with the right skills, the right determination, the right moment. She didn't know it yet, but forces were already in motion. Miranda had made a decision that would shake Khalid's world, and Layla's refusal to be diminished was about to create consequences none of them could have predicted. The engagement party had happened without her, but the real story was just beginning. And that red dress from Khalid's cruel joke? It was about to become a symbol of something neither he nor anyone else expected. Redemption was coming, and it would arrive wearing exactly what it had been mocked for. Miranda's penthouse apartment overlooked the city from the 42nd floor of the Azure Towers, a building where even the smallest unit cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Layla stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun rise over a world that had suddenly shifted beneath her feet. Just days ago, she had been scrubbing floors. Now she was living in a guest room that was larger than her entire apartment, working as personal attendant to one of the city's most prominent socialites. Coffee? Miranda appeared in silk pajamas that probably cost more than Layla's monthly rent, holding 2 steaming mugs. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and without makeup, she looked younger and more vulnerable than her public persona suggested. Thank you. Layla accepted the mug, still uncomfortable with being served by someone who was technically her employer. Miranda settled onto the white leather sofa, tucking her legs beneath her. We need to talk about the wedding, and about Khalid. Over the next hour, Miranda revealed the truth behind the glamorous engagement that society pages had celebrated. The marriage had been arranged by their families, a business merger disguised as romance. Miranda's father needed Khalid's connections in Middle Eastern markets. Khalid's family wanted the prestige and respectability that came with marrying into British aristocracy. I thought I could make it work, Miranda said, staring into her coffee. I thought maybe affection would grow over time. But then I started seeing how he treats people. The staff at restaurants, the drivers, anyone he considers beneath him. It's like he needs to prove his superiority constantly. Why go through with it then? Layla asked gently. Because I've never had the courage to disappoint my family. Because I've been trained since childhood to do what's expected. Because... She paused, tears forming. Because I didn't know there was another option until I met you. Layla looked at her in confusion. I don't understand. You stood up to him. You refused to be diminished. You walked away from a job you needed because your dignity mattered more. I've never done anything like that in my life. I've always been the good daughter, the perfect fiancé, the one who smiles for photographers while dying inside. Miranda. I want to call off the wedding, Miranda said suddenly, the words tumbling out in a rush. But I can't do it alone. If I just cancel, my family will convince me to reconsider. Khalid will charm and manipulate. I need something to make the break permanent. Something that shows everyone who he really is. Layla's heart began beating faster. What are you suggesting? Miranda stood and walked to her bedroom, returning moments later with a garment bag. She unzipped it slowly, and Layla's breath caught. It was the red dress, the engagement dress from Khalid's mansion, the one he had mocked her about, the one he had used as a prop in his cruel joke. Miranda, how did you... Khalid had it sent here after the engagement party. Said I should keep it as a reminder of how much he spent on me. Miranda's voice was bitter. But I think we should use it differently. I think you should wear it. I don't understand. The wedding is in 2 days. There's a pre-ceremony reception where both families will be present, along with business partners, society reporters, everyone who matters in our world. Miranda's eyes were bright with something between fear and determination. I want you there, wearing this dress, looking absolutely stunning. I want Khalid to see you and remember his joke. And then I want to announce that the wedding is cancelled because I've finally seen him for who he really is. Layla shook her head. That's social suicide for you. Your reputation... My reputation as what? As someone who married a cruel man for business reasons. I'd rather be known for having standards. Miranda took Layla's hands. Please, help me do the right thing. Help me show him that the people he mocks and dismisses can't be bought or broken. There has to be another way. There isn't. Not one that would make the same point. Don't you see? His joke was that someone like you could never belong in his world. But what if you do? What if you walk into that reception looking more elegant and dignified than anyone there? What if you prove that Grace has nothing to do with bank accounts? Layla looked at the dress, remembering the humiliation of that night. Remembering Khalid's laughter, his friend's mockery, the assumption that she was less than human because she cleaned for a living. If I do this, Layla said slowly, there will be consequences. Not just for you, but for me. For Amira. We'll be in every society column, every gossip site. People will dig into our lives. I know. And I'll make sure you and Amira are protected. Financially, legally, whatever you need. I have access to my own inheritance, separate from my father. You'll never have to worry about money again. This isn't about money. I know, Miranda said softly. It's about dignity. It's about standing up to people who think they can treat others as disposable. It's about showing the world that kindness and character matter more than wealth and status. Layla thought about her mother, who had worked herself into an early grave so Layla could have opportunities she never had. Thought about Amira, studying to become an architect, dreaming of buildings that would stand for generations. Thought about all the other housekeepers, waiters, drivers, and service workers who swallowed daily humiliations just to survive. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Miranda insisted on professional hair and makeup, the works. She hired a stylist who brought shoes, jewelry, accessories. But she was adamant about one thing. No radical transformation. Layla would look like the best version of herself, not like someone pretending to be someone else. The point isn't to make you look like one of them, Miranda explained. The point is to show that you don't need to look like them to have worth. On the morning of the reception, Layla stood before the full-length mirror in Miranda's penthouse and barely recognized herself. The red dress fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her body specifically. Her hair was styled simply but elegantly. The makeup enhanced her natural features rather than masking them. But what surprised her most was her expression. She looked confident, strong, like someone who knew her value regardless of what others thought. "You're stunning," Miranda breathed, appearing behind her. "Absolutely stunning." "I'm terrified," Layla admitted. "Good. It means you're human. But Layla, look at yourself. Really look. You deserve to wear this dress. You deserve to walk into that room with your head high. You deserve respect." Amira arrived just before they were scheduled to leave. Miranda had invited her, insisting that Layla should have family support. When Amira saw her mother, she burst into tears. "Mama, you look like a queen." "I look like someone wearing a dress too expensive for common sense," Layla said, but she was smiling. "No," Amira said fiercely. "You look like exactly who you are. Someone dignified and beautiful and strong. Someone who taught me that our worth isn't determined by other people's opinions." The car service Miranda had arranged pulled up outside. A sleek vehicle with a professional driver who opened doors and treated them with genuine respect. As they drove toward the Grandview Hotel where the reception would be held, Layla felt her heart racing. "Are you ready for this?" Miranda asked, squeezing her hand. "No," Layla admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." The Grandview's grand ballroom was even more spectacular than Khalid's mansion. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from vaulted ceilings. Ice sculptures melted slowly on tables laden with delicacies flown in from around the world. A string quartet played classical music in one corner, while waiters circulated with champagne and appetizers. The room was filled with exactly the type of people Layla had spent her career being invisible to. Business magnates, socialites, politicians, celebrities. Everyone dressed in designer labels. Everyone comfortable in this world of extreme wealth. When they entered, conversation didn't stop immediately, but gradually, like ripples spreading across water, people began to notice. First the dress, which many recognized from society coverage of the engagement party. Then Layla herself, clearly not someone who belonged to this crowd but wearing that dress with surprising grace. And then Khalid saw her. He was standing with a group of business associates, laughing at some joke, when his eyes landed on Layla. His glass stopped halfway to his lips. His expression froze. Every trace of color drained from his face. Layla met his eyes across the crowded room, and for the first time in her life, she didn't look away first. The game had begun, and Khalid al-Rahman was about to learn that some people couldn't be dismissed as easily as he assumed. The silence that fell over the ballroom was suffocating. Khalid stood frozen, his champagne glass trembling in his hand as he stared at Layla. Around him, his business associates followed his gaze, confusion crossing their faces. They didn't understand what they were seeing, only that their host looked like he had seen a ghost. Miranda squeezed Layla's hand once, then released it. "Remember," she whispered, "you belong here as much as anyone, more than most." Layla forced herself to breathe steadily as she walked further into the room. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, hear the whispers spreading like wildfire. But she kept her head high, her steps measured and graceful. She wasn't pretending to be something she wasn't. She was simply refusing to pretend she was less than she was. "Layla." A familiar voice made her turn. It was Victoria Sterling, the estate manager who had threatened her just weeks ago. Victoria's expression was a mixture of shock and something that might have been fear. "What are you doing here?" "I'm a guest," Layla replied simply. "Is that a problem?" Before Victoria could respond, Khalid was suddenly there, having crossed the ballroom with surprising speed. Up close, Layla could see the fury blazing in his eyes, barely contained beneath a veneer of social politeness. "We need to talk," he said through gritted teeth. "Now, privately." "I don't think we have anything to discuss," Layla responded calmly. "You're wearing the dress." His voice was low, dangerous. "That dress, my dress. How dare you?" "Actually," Miranda appeared at Layla's side, her voice carrying across the nearby guests who were straining to hear. "It's my dress, and I invited Layla to wear it." "Is there a problem, Khalid?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Khalid looked between Miranda and Layla, clearly struggling to maintain composure in front of so many important people. His friends from that night at the mansion had noticed the commotion and were making their way over. "Miranda, what's going on?" The portly man with the gold chain had confusion written all over his face. "Isn't that the woman from... Wait, isn't she the housekeeper?" "Was," Khalid corrected sharply. She was a housekeeper until she forgot her place. Her place? An unexpected voice joined the conversation. An elderly woman in an elegant navy ensemble approached, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her eyes sharp with intelligence. "And what place would that be, Mr. Al-Rahman?" Khalid's expression shifted to one of forced respect. "Mrs. Catherine Whitmore, I didn't realize you'd arrived. I just meant—" "I heard what you meant," Mrs. Whitmore interrupted. She was a legendary figure in society circles, old money from a banking dynasty that predated most of the new fortunes in the room. Her opinion could make or break reputations. "And I'm curious what you mean by her place. Please do elaborate." The surrounding guests had gone completely quiet, sensing drama. Khalid's jaw tightened. "It's a private matter, made very public by your reaction," Mrs. Whitmore observed dryly. She turned to Layla, her expression softening. "My dear, that dress is absolutely stunning on you. And unless I'm mistaken, you're the same woman who did those extraordinary alterations on Miranda's wedding gown?" She showed me photographs. The workmanship was museum quality. "Thank you, ma'am," Layla responded quietly. "My mother was a seamstress. She taught me." "Clearly she taught you well. Tell me, what brings you to this evening's festivities?" Before Layla could answer, Khalid's tall friend with the perpetual sneer spoke up. "Khalid, isn't she the one you made that joke about? Remember, you said if she could wear the engagement dress without looking ridiculous, you'd marry her instead of Miranda." The statement dropped like a bomb. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Mrs. Whitmore's expression turned glacial as she looked at Khalid. "You said what?" Miranda's voice was sharp as broken glass. "It was just a joke," Khalid said quickly, but sweat was forming on his forehead. "A harmless joke among friends. She's making too much of it." "A harmless joke?" Layla spoke now, her voice steady, despite the emotion churning inside her. "You mocked me in front of your friends for entertainment. You suggested I try on a dress worth more than I earn in a year, just so you could all laugh at how ridiculous I looked. And when I refused to be your entertainment, you fired me and destroyed my professional reputation." "That's not—" Khalid started. "It's exactly what happened," Miranda interrupted. "And it wasn't the first time, was it, Khalid? Should we talk about how you treat restaurant staff, or drivers, or the woman who cleans your office? Miranda, we should discuss this privately." "Why?" Miranda's voice rose. "So you can convince me it's fine? So you can explain that treating people as if they're less than human is just your sense of humor? I'm done with private conversations where you gaslight me into thinking cruelty is acceptable." Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat. "Mr. Al-Rahman, I've known you since you were a child. I knew your father. And I must say, he would be deeply ashamed of the man you've become." The words hit Khalid like physical blows. His father, deceased for 5 years, had been his hero, the man whose approval he had always sought. Several older guests nodded in agreement with Mrs. Whitmore's assessment. "My father built an empire," Khalid began defensively. "Your father built an empire while treating every employee with dignity and respect," Mrs. Whitmore corrected sharply. "I remember him stopping to learn the names of security guards, thanking cleaning staff personally, ensuring everyone who worked for him had health care and fair wages. You inherited his wealth, but not his character." The indictment was devastating, made worse by being delivered in front of the very people whose respect Khalid craved most. His face flushed red with humiliation and rage. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice rising. "You're all acting like I committed some terrible crime. I made a joke. She's a housekeeper. It's not like she's a human being." Amira's voice cut through his words. Layla's daughter had been watching from the sidelines, but now she stepped forward, young but fierce. "She's a human being who worked 16-hour days to give me opportunities, who sacrificed everything so I could go to university, who taught me that dignity isn't something anyone can take away from you, only something you can give away yourself." "Who even are you?" Khalid snapped. "I'm her daughter, and watching you try to diminish her makes me understand exactly why Miranda is making the choice she's making tonight." Khalid turned to Miranda, realization dawning. "What choice?" Miranda took a deep breath. The moment had arrived. The ballroom was silent, everyone watching, waiting. This was it, the point of no return. "I'm calling off the wedding," Miranda said clearly, her voice carrying across the entire space. "I can't marry someone who treats other people as if they're disposable. Who thinks cruelty is humor? Who measures human worth by bank account balances? Chaos erupted. Gasps, shocked exclamations, the immediate buzz of people pulling out phones to spread the news. Khalid stood stunned, unable to process what was happening. "You can't," he finally said. "The families, the business arrangements, can all be renegotiated by people who actually care about business more than human decency," Miranda finished. "I'm done, Khalid. I'm done pretending your behavior is acceptable. I'm done making excuses. I'm done." She turned to Layla. "And I'm grateful to you for showing me that it's possible to choose dignity over convenience. That standing up for yourself is worth whatever consequences come." Mrs. Whitmore began to clap. Slowly, deliberately, her applause echoed through the silent ballroom. Then others joined. Not everyone, not even most people, but enough. Enough to make it clear that the tide had turned. Khalid looked around wildly, searching for support, but found none. His friends from that night at the mansion had quietly melted into the crowd, unwilling to associate with someone who had just been so publicly humiliated. The business associates were already calculating how to distance themselves from the scandal. "This isn't over," Khalid said, his voice shaking. "You'll regret this. All of you." "No," Layla said quietly but firmly. "The only person who will regret anything is you. Because you had everything, and you threw it away because you couldn't treat people with basic human respect." As Khalid stormed out of the ballroom, his world crumbling around him, Layla felt something she hadn't expected. Not triumph, not vindication, but something quieter and more profound. Peace. She had stood up for herself. She had refused to be diminished. And in doing so, she had helped another woman find the courage to do the same. The red dress had become exactly what Miranda said it would be. Not a symbol of mockery, but a declaration of dignity. The morning after the cancelled wedding, Layla woke in Miranda's guest room to find her phone exploding with notifications. The story had gone viral overnight. Social media was ablaze with debate. News outlets were calling it everything from the Cinderella Rebellion to when dignity defeated wealth. But what surprised Layla most was the direction the narrative had taken. She had expected to be mocked, dismissed, painted as someone who had overstepped. Instead, thousands of people were sharing their own stories. Service workers who had been humiliated, employees who had been treated as invisible, people who had swallowed their dignity daily just to survive. "It's bigger than us," Miranda said, appearing with coffee as she had every morning since Layla arrived. But today her expression was different, lighter, free. "Look at this." She showed Layla her tablet, scrolling through hundreds of posts. Restaurant servers talking about customers who snapped fingers at them. Delivery drivers sharing stories of being blamed for things beyond their control. Housekeepers describing years of being treated as furniture. "They're calling it the dignity movement," Miranda said softly. "Because of you. Because you refused to accept that your economic circumstances made you less human." "I didn't do anything special," Layla protested. "I just stood up for myself. That's exactly what made it special. You didn't have power or money or connections. You just had the courage to say, no, I deserve better than this." And it gave thousands of other people permission to say the same thing. Over the following days, the story continued to evolve. Mrs. Catherine Whitmore gave an interview to the city's most prestigious newspaper, talking about the importance of treating all people with respect, regardless of their profession. She pointedly mentioned that her own grandmother had been a seamstress, and that hard work was more admirable than inherited wealth. Other society figures began speaking out. Some defended Khalid, dismissing the entire incident as political correctness gone too far. But surprisingly, many didn't. Many admitted they had witnessed similar behavior and had said nothing. Some even confessed to their own moments of casual cruelty toward service workers. The business world moved quickly. Several of Khalid's investors pulled funding, citing concerns about leadership values and public perception. His board of directors called an emergency meeting. The technology and real estate empire his father had built began showing cracks in its foundation. But Layla barely registered any of this. She was too focused on what came next for her and Amira. Miranda had been true to her word about financial support, but Layla struggled with accepting it. "I've worked my whole life," she told Miranda over breakfast weeks after the cancelled wedding. "Taking money I didn't earn feels wrong." You earned it by having the courage to do what I couldn't do alone, Miranda countered. But if it makes you uncomfortable, then let's think of it differently. What would you do if money wasn't a concern? What would bring you joy? The question haunted Layla for days. She had spent so long focused on survival that she had never considered joy. But slowly, an idea began forming. Her mother had been a seamstress. Layla herself had skills in alterations and design, and she had witnessed firsthand how something as simple as a beautiful dress could transform how a woman saw herself. "I want to open a boutique," she told Miranda finally, "but not a regular boutique. One that provides professional clothing to women re-entering the workforce. Women leaving abusive relationships. Women coming out of homelessness. Women who have the skills for good jobs but not the wardrobe. And I want to teach sewing classes. Pass on what my mother taught me." Miranda's eyes filled with tears. "That's beautiful. Let's make it happen." The Layla Hassan Foundation launched 6 months after the canceled wedding. It occupied a modest storefront in a neighborhood that bridged the wealthy district and the working-class areas. Inside, racks of professional clothing donated by Miranda's society connections, mixed with pieces Layla had altered or created herself. Women could come in for free consultations, receive complete interview outfits, and attend workshops on everything from resume writing to confidence building. But the sewing classes were what Layla loved most. Every Saturday, she taught a dozen women the skills her mother had taught her: how to measure accurately, how to understand fabric and drape, how to transform something ordinary into something special. "My mother used to say that sewing is about transformation," Layla told her students one Saturday morning. "Not just transforming fabric, but transforming how we see ourselves. Every stitch is an act of care. Every seam is a promise that something better is possible." Among her students was a woman named Grace, who had spent 3 years in a domestic violence shelter before finally leaving her abuser. She was training to become a medical assistant, but couldn't afford professional clothes for interviews. "I never thought I deserved nice things," Grace confessed during one session, her hands shaking as she tried to thread a needle. "He told me I was worthless so many times I started believing it." Layla put her hand over Grace's, steadying it. "You are not worthless. You are here, learning, growing, building a new life. That takes more courage than most people will ever need to show." "Did you ever feel worthless?" Grace asked. Layla thought about Khalid's mansion, about being mocked in that display room, about years of being invisible. "Yes, many times, but I learned something important. Other people's cruelty says everything about them and nothing about us. Our worth doesn't come from their approval." "Is it true what they say? That you wore a dress to a fancy party and it changed everything?" "I wore a dress I had been mocked about, but it wasn't the dress that changed things. It was deciding that I deserved to exist in spaces where people assumed I didn't belong. It was refusing to shrink myself to make cruel people comfortable." While the foundation flourished, Khalid's empire continued to crumble. His board had removed him as CEO, replacing him with a professional manager who immediately began repairing relationships with employees and partners. Several of his business associates had publicly apologized for their own past behavior, crediting the incident at the wedding reception as a wake-up call. But Khalid himself had vanished from public life. Some said he had left the country. Others claimed he was living in one of his properties in isolation. The man who had once been everywhere, whose every move had been covered by society pages, had become invisible, until one morning, almost a year after the cancelled wedding, when Layla arrived at the foundation to find someone waiting outside. Khalid al-Rahman looked like a different man. He had lost weight, and not in a healthy way. His expensive clothes hung loosely on his frame. His eyes, once so confident and cruel, were hollow and haunted. When he saw Layla, he didn't speak immediately. He just stared, as if she were an apparition he wasn't sure was real. "What do you want?" Layla asked, her hand on the door, ready to retreat inside if necessary. "To apologize," Khalid said, his voice cracking. "I know I have no right to ask for your time. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know. I need you to understand what you did." "What I did?" Layla's voice was sharp. "I didn't do anything except refuse to be your entertainment." "You held up a mirror," Khalid said. "You showed me who I had become, and it destroyed me. It should have destroyed me." Layla studied him, trying to discern if this was genuine or another manipulation, but there was something in his broken posture, his obvious shame, that seemed real. "Why are you here?" she asked again. "Because I've spent the last year trying to understand how I became the person who could treat another human being that way. I've been in therapy. Real therapy. Not the kind where rich people pay someone to tell them they're fine. I've been confronting things about myself I spent my whole life avoiding." He paused, gathering courage to continue. "My father. Everyone thinks he was this amazing man who treated people well. And in public he was. But at home he was different. He taught me that the world was divided into winners and losers, and that showing kindness to losers was weakness. He mocked my mother for caring about the staff. He fired people for minor mistakes just to show he could. Tears were running down Khalid's face now, and he made no effort to hide them. I became him. I became exactly what he made me, and I convinced myself it was strength. That being cruel meant being powerful. And then you showed me what real strength looks like. Walking away from a job you needed because you wouldn't compromise your dignity. That's power I never had." Layla felt something shifting inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first step toward it. Understanding. "What do you want from me?" she asked more gently. "Nothing. I want nothing from you. I just wanted you to know that you changed my life. Not just by humiliating me, though I deserved that, but by showing me there's another way to exist in the world. That treating people with respect isn't weakness. That real power comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is a bank transfer authorization. I'm donating $10 million to your foundation. No strings attached, no publicity, no tax write-off, just trying to do something good with money I didn't earn and definitely didn't deserve." Layla took the envelope with shaking hands. $10 million, more than she could have imagined. Enough to expand the foundation across the entire city, maybe beyond. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Khalid replied. "Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep teaching people that they have worth. Keep being the person who had more courage in one moment than I've shown in my entire life." He turned to leave, but Layla's voice stopped him. "Khalid?" He looked back, hope and fear warring on his face. "The fact that you're here, that you've spent a year trying to change, that matters. It doesn't erase what you did, but it matters." Fresh tears spilled down his face. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for seeing me as capable of being better." As he walked away, Layla felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction at his suffering, but sadness at how much pain people carried. How that pain twisted them into versions of themselves they never meant to become, and hoped that change was always possible. She went inside and called Miranda, who arrived within the hour. Together they looked at the bank transfer authorization, at the zeros that would transform their small operation into something that could change thousands of lives. "He came to apologize," Layla told her. "And I think he meant it." "Do you forgive him?" Miranda asked. "I don't know. Maybe someday. But I recognize that he's trying to become better, and that's worth acknowledging." "You're a better person than I am," Miranda said. "I'm still angry at him for years of watching him treat people as disposable." "Anger is okay too," Layla smiled. "We all heal differently." The months that followed saw the foundation expand dramatically. They opened 3 new locations, each in a different neighborhood, each serving women who needed not just clothing, but hope. Layla hired staff, including several women who had been students in her sewing classes and had discovered a passion for design and alterations. Grace, the woman who had escaped domestic violence, became the foundation's head seamstress. She trained others while working on her medical assistant certification at night. "You saved my life," she told Layla one evening as they locked up the main location together. "You saved your own life," Layla corrected gently. "I just provided a space for you to remember your worth." Isn't that the same thing? Maybe it was. Layla was learning that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply see people, acknowledge their humanity, treat them as if they mattered, because they did. Amira graduated from university with honors, her thesis on sustainable architecture winning multiple awards. She announced her intention to design affordable housing that didn't sacrifice beauty or dignity. "My mother taught me that everyone deserves to live in spaces that honor their humanity," she said in her graduation speech. "Not just the wealthy." Miranda had found her own path as well. She started a non-profit focused on workers' rights and dignity in employment. She lobbied for better protections for domestic workers, restaurant staff, and others in service industries. She became a voice for people who had been voiceless, using her privilege to amplify their stories rather than silence them. "I spent so many years worried about doing what was expected," she told Layla over coffee one morning. "And it took your example to show me that the most important expectation to meet is your own. To be able to look in the mirror and respect who you see." 2 years after the cancelled wedding, Mrs. Catherine Whitmore hosted an event honoring women who had made significant contributions to social justice. Layla was among the honorees, though she had initially refused the recognition. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," she protested when Miranda told her about the nomination. "You did something better than extraordinary," Mrs. Whitmore said when she personally called to insist Layla attend. "You did something honest. You refused to accept being treated as less than human, and in doing so, you reminded thousands of other people that they didn't have to accept it either." The night of the ceremony, Layla stood in front of her closet, looking at the clothes that represented her journey. Simple work uniforms from her years as a housekeeper. The red dress that had become a symbol of dignity reclaimed. Beautiful new pieces she had designed and sewn herself. She chose to wear something she had made, a simple but elegant dress in deep blue. Not because she was ashamed of the red dress, but because she wanted to honor all versions of herself. The woman who had cleaned floors, the woman who had worn red and refused to be diminished, the woman who now taught others to stitch together new lives. At the ceremony, she accepted the award with grace, but insisted on sharing the stage with grace, with other women from the foundation, with everyone who had been part of the movement that started with one moment of refusing to accept cruelty. "This award doesn't belong to me alone," she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom. Ironically, the same ballroom where the cancelled wedding reception had taken place. "It belongs to every person who has been made to feel invisible, every worker who has swallowed humiliation, every human being who has been treated as if their worth is measured by their paycheck." She paused, looking out at the audience. In the crowd, she saw familiar faces. Miranda, beaming with pride. Amira, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mrs. Whitmore, nodding approvingly. And in the back, trying to remain unseen, was Khalid. Their eyes met across the distance. He wasn't there for redemption or forgiveness. He was there to witness, to remember, to hold himself accountable. Layla gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. Not forgiveness yet, maybe not ever, but recognition that he was trying. "The truth is," Layla continued, "we all have moments where we can choose cruelty or kindness, where we can make someone feel small or help them feel seen. And those moments matter more than money, more than status, more than any measure of success society teaches us to value." She looked down at the award in her hands, a beautiful crystal sculpture that probably cost more than she used to earn in months. "My mother used to say that sewing teaches you patience, that you can't rush transformation. You have to take it one stitch at a time, trusting that eventually all those tiny stitches will create something beautiful and strong. That's what we're doing here. Taking our moments of choosing dignity, choosing kindness, choosing to see each other's humanity, and stitching them together into a society where everyone is treated with the respect they deserve." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. But what Layla would remember most wasn't the applause. It was the faces of women in the audience who had been invisible their whole lives, who were seeing themselves reflected, honored, celebrated for the first time. After the ceremony, as people mingled and congratulated honorees, Layla found herself alone for a moment on the balcony, overlooking the city lights. "Mama," Amira's voice was soft behind her. "Are you okay?" Layla turned, smiling at her daughter. "I'm more than okay. I'm grateful." "For what?" "For learning that dignity isn't something anyone can take from you, that standing up for yourself matters, that transformation is always possible, for everyone, even for people like Khalid, especially for people like Khalid. Because if we believe people can't change, then we're saying our own changes don't matter either, that the work we do to become better doesn't count." They stood together, mother and daughter, looking out at a city that had witnessed their transformation. from invisible housekeeper and struggling student to leaders of a movement that touched thousands of lives. "The dress is in a museum now," Amira said suddenly. "Did you know? The Fashion and Cultural History Museum asked Miranda to donate it. They're calling it a symbol of the dignity movement." Layla laughed. "A $500,000 dress in a museum because someone refused to try it on." "Not just refused to try it on," Amira corrected. "Refused to be entertainment for cruelty. That's what the museum plaque says. It tells the whole story." "What story is that?" "About a woman who cleaned houses and raised a daughter, and learned from her mother that true elegance isn't about what you wear, but how you treat others. About a moment when she was mocked and chose dignity. About how that choice started a wave of change that affected thousands of people." Layla felt tears on her cheeks. "My mother would be proud." "She would be," Amira agreed. "But Mama, I think she already knew. I think she knew exactly who you were when she taught you to sew. When she showed you that transformation happens one stitch at a time. She was preparing you for this." As they returned to the party, Layla thought about all the transformations she had witnessed. Miranda finding courage to choose authenticity over convenience. Grace rebuilding a life from ashes. Khalid beginning the hard work of becoming someone worth respecting. The foundation students learning skills and rediscovering worth and herself. Transformed from someone who had learned to be invisible into someone who taught others to be seen. The red dress might be in a museum, but what it represented was alive in every woman who chose dignity, every person who refused to accept being treated as disposable. Every moment someone stood up and said, "I deserve better than this." Years later, when people asked Layla about that night at the cancelled wedding, about wearing the dress and standing up to cruelty, she would always say the same thing. It wasn't about the dress. It was never about the dress. It was about remembering that our worth doesn't come from other people's opinions, that dignity is our birthright, not something we have to earn, and that the most revolutionary thing you can do in a world that wants you to feel small is to stand tall and refuse to shrink. The Layla Hassan Foundation continues to serve women across the city and beyond. The dignity movement sparked by one woman's refusal to accept cruelty has spread globally, inspiring policy changes, workplace reforms, and a cultural shift in how service workers are treated. And somewhere, in a museum, a red dress hangs as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful act of rebellion is simply believing you deserve respect.